Good morning, everyone. I'm going to call the Assembly Committee on Judiciary to order. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Here.
Assemblywoman Cohen.
Here.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez.
Here.
Assemblywoman Hanson.
Here.
Assemblywoman Hardy.
Here.
Assemblywoman Kasama.
Here.
Assemblywoman Krasner.
Here.
Assemblywoman Marzola.
Here.
Assemblyman Miller.
Here.
Assemblywoman Wynn.
Here.
Assemblyman O'Neill.
Here.
Assemblyman Orentlicker.
Here.
Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Here.
Assemblyman Wheeler.
Here.
Chairman Yeager.
I haven't done it.
Here.
You can't come in front of the camera.
Good morning, everyone. We do have a quorum. It looks like everyone is present. Want to say good morning to our committee members and those who may be watching either on the legislature's website or on the YouTube channel this morning. Welcome to day 25 of the 81st session of the Nevada Legislature. Before we get started with housekeeping rules, I did want to wish a very happy birthday to former Assembly Judiciary Chair and former Majority Leader, Mr. William Horn. So if you are watching, sir, we hope you have a great birthday today. Before we get started with the agenda, we have a few housekeeping rules to go over. Most of these are familiar by now, but for those who are on the Zoom with us, if you could remember to mute when you're not speaking, that will help with the audio feedback. And then for our presenters this morning who may not have presented yet in this format, if you can remember to state your name each time you speak, that will help our committee secretary with the minutes. I realize it's an awkward thing to do, so if you forget, I'll probably interrupt you and remind you, and hopefully by the end of the meeting, we will have it all down. We do expect courtesy and respect in our interactions with one another. We don't always agree on policy. That's perfectly okay, but we need to make sure we're being respectful of one another and of the legislative institution. And finally, many of the members have multiple screens and devices in front of them, so please don't see it as a sign of disrespect or inattention if members appear to be looking away. They're most likely looking at exhibits. I do that on my iPad as well, so if you see me looking away, that's what's happening. Okay, so let's move on to our agenda for the day. Members, as you can see, we have one bill on the agenda today, and before I open that bill, I wanted to remind members that at some point this morning, I'll probably have to jump off of the Zoom and go present a bill in government affairs. So if you see me drop off the meeting, that's what's happening, and our able Vice Chair, Wynn, will take over at that point, and hopefully I'll be back before we're done for the day. So at this time, I'm going to open up the hearing on Assembly Bill 151. Assembly Bill 151 revises provisions relating to offenses, and we have our own Assembly Judiciary member, Assemblywoman Gonzalez, to present the bill, and she has a few folks with her as well. Let me just pull this up to make sure I've got their list. So she has a few other presenters who are on Zoom with us, including Miss Turner, Miss Mosley, Miss Williams, and Miss Moya Garay. So I want to welcome the four of you to the Assembly Judiciary Committee. We'll give you a chance to present the bill, and then I'm sure we'll have some questions. So Assemblywoman Gonzalez, please take it away when you're ready.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair Yeager. For the record, I'm Cecilia Gonzalez, representing Assembly District 16 here in Clark County. Well, we're here in Carson City, but in beautiful Clark County. I just wanted to make note of the amendment that I sent out last evening that Senator Dallas Harris will be joining this bill as a primary sponsor. And so that should have been in your inboxes last night. Here with me today, I have Lisa Mosley, the Nevada State Director for Fines and Fees with the Justice Center. I also have Leslie Turner, who is with Plan Nevada. We're here today to present Assembly Bill 151, which reverses the suspensions of driver's licenses. And before I hand it over to our amazing presenters, I just wanted to briefly talk about why I brought this bill forward. Debt-based license suspensions force an impossible choice: to either stop driving and lose access to work and basic necessities, or to keep driving, thus risking arrest and even more fines and fees later. And so, this bill is seeking to address one of the many cycles of poverty and incarceration that we have in our communities. And so with that, I'm going to hand it off to Lisa Mosley and Leslie Turner to present the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Gonzalez. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Greetings to you and members of the committee. I'm Lisa Mosley, the State Director for the Fines and Fees Justice Center. We are a national organization that works to eliminate fees that are associated with the criminal justice system and to make fines more equitable and just. I am super excited and a little nervous to be co-presenting this bill today alongside Assemblywoman Gonzalez, Leslie Turner, and along with Ms. Williams and Ms. Moya. This is an issue that is really close to my heart. Some of you have known me for a while and know my story. I'm not alone in this. I assure you I'm not alone in this. In the state of Nevada, between July 2017 and July 2019, over 38,000 Nevadans had their driver licenses suspended simply because they could not afford to pay an outstanding fee or fine associated with the traffic violation. And it seems that the practice of suspending driver licenses for unpaid debt is premised on the belief that people are unwilling to pay or just don't want to pay. But what the research shows is that is not the case. Rather than being unwilling to pay traffic fines and fees, people are simply unable to pay. If COVID has done anything, it has highlighted inequities and it has highlighted issues like poverty and unemployment. And so rather than looking at this through the lens of people being unwilling to pay, the research shows that people are simply not able to pay. And as an example to support that, we looked at some data around the state. The top 5 zip codes in the greater Las Vegas area have the highest rates of traffic warrants. And though this is not a warrants bill, warrants and suspensions go hand in hand. So looking at the top 5 zip codes in the greater Las Vegas area, greater Las Vegas area, we see that those warrants issued are also the same zip codes where we see the highest rates of food insecurity and the lowest median incomes. So it stands to reason that it's not that people are unwilling to pay, it's that they're simply unable to pay. Our research also shows that suspensions just simply make it harder for people to find work, to retain work, and it prevents them from being able to pay these debts. And it also, in many cases, prevents them from being able to support their families. It traps them in a cycle of poverty. And once they're in that cycle, we find that it's really nearly impossible to get out of. People who can't pay their fines and fees, they, as Assemblywoman mentioned, face an impossible choice. Do they continue to drive, or do they lose their employment and often their jobs and not be able to take care of their families? These are the same, people have to drive. They have to drive their children to school. They have to get to doctor's appointments. They have to get to places that are necessities. And with COVID and social distancing guidelines in place, we are being asked to distance ourselves, so people find it necessary to drive. And many cases, we don't have adequate public transportation in many cases, and utilizing ride sharing sometimes is also very difficult for people, particularly since they don't have the income to support that. And people risk the possibility of going to jail, being arrested, and just being assessed more fines and fees. And so San Francisco, looking at states, California, and looking at jurisdictions who have already ended this practice. And there are states around the country that have already ended this practice. 2 of them, California and Texas, have seen an actual increase in revenue. And I bring this up because looking at the opposition, Much of the opposition comes because people are concerned about the revenue, and rightfully so, to their state. But what the research shows is that for states that have ended this practice, they've actually seen an increase in revenue. Why is that? Because now people are able to get to work, they're able to retain their jobs, they have mobility. And data out of Phoenix, Arizona, who has a program for people who have outstanding traffic violations or outstanding debt, Phoenix data out of Phoenix shows that when people don't have their license suspended, once their licenses are reinstated, their mobility increases. They are able to get to work. They are able to retain jobs. And Phoenix has seen an actual increase in their GDP of about $1.49 million. That's pretty significant. That's pretty significant. And so I also want to talk just for a minute about Texas. Texas is one of the states who has ended the practice of driver license suspensions. Two jurisdictions in particular, Fort Worth and Dallas, Texas, which many of us know are kind of side by side. One, Fort Worth uses a system of suspending driver's licenses. I'm sorry, that's Dallas, not Fort Worth, that uses a system of suspending driver's license. Dallas, on the other hand, does not. In the year that followed them implementing that practice, Fort Worth, virtually shows no difference in the revenue that they collected per case. Fort Worth collects about $116 per case that's disposed of, and Dallas collecting about $113. So we see that driver license suspensions doesn't make it so that it doesn't make people pay more. States are not seeing an increase in revenue as a result of it. They're actually seeing an increase in revenue in many cases when they stop suspending driver's license. Now, we're still working as the Fines and Fees Justice Center to collect more data around the country for the states that have stopped suspending. Of course, COVID kind of made that a little bit more complicated, but we're working on collecting that data so that we can present it to you as well. Assembly Bill 151, as Assemblywoman Gonzalez mentioned, will simply end the ability for jurisdictions to suspend driver's license for unpaid fines and fees. We think that's a great thing. And so now I will go into the sections of the bill. Section 1 of AB 151. Now, thank you for this. This is my first time doing it, so please forgive me if I'm a little bit nervous. But Section 1 of AB 151 simply removes the authority of the court to suspend a person's driver license or prohibit a person with a suspended license from applying for a driver's license if they have a delinquent fine, administrative assessment, or fee, and their restitution, and was originally imposed for minor traffic offense. Minor traffic offense is defined in existing law, NRS 176.0643. The statute states that a minor traffic offense means a violation of any state or local law or ordinance governing the operation of a motor vehicle upon the highway within the state, other than a violation of chapters 484A, 484E, inclusive of 706 NRS that causes death of a person. These chapters include, and I'm reading, these chapters include 484, which covers provisions governing traffic laws generally, Chapter 484B, which contains the rules of the road, Chapter 484C, which contains provisions governing regarding driving under the influence of alcohol or prohibited substance. I should also mention that this bill does not take away the authority to suspend driver's licenses for DUI related offenses and things, and reckless driving. I know that has been a concern. We have had that concern expressed to us. This bill does not do that. Some of the exceptions to this include a violation of NRS 484C 1.1, 1.0, or 484C.120, which are driving under the influence, as I just mentioned. Section 2 provides that the court does not need to notify the Department of Motor Vehicles for a person's failure to appear for a minor traffic offense. Section 3 provides that if a person is subject to a suspension on the effective date of this bill, his or her driver's license be reinstated, or the person be notified of their ability to reinstate his or her driver's license. This bill also provides that the DMV must not charge any fee for reinstatement of a driver's license or require a person to undergo any physical or mental examination to be eligible for the reinstatement of their driver's license. Lastly, this bill applies to offenses committed on or after October 1st, 2021, the effective date. As Assemblywoman mentioned, the proposed amendment is that Senator Harris is going to come on as a primary sponsor. And I think that's all I have for now. So I want to say thank you to Chair Yeager and to the committee for considering AB 151. I certainly urge your support on this bill. I will turn it over now to Ms. Turner and to offer her remarks.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley. Ms. Turner, before you get started, I just wanted to let folks know that we're going to let the presentation conclude. We'll hear from the other speakers, and then we'll take questions then. So just let me or the Vice Chair know if you have questions, and we'll proceed in that manner. And Ms. Mosley, I couldn't tell that was your first time. You didn't seem nervous at all. So
well, thank you, Chair.
Very well done.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
Same with Assemblywoman Gonzalez as well. You guys are like old pros doing this already. So Ms. Turner, I think you're up next. Please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. So I'll just get right into my remarks. Sorry. I am with Plans of Nevada. I'm also the founder of the Mass Liberation Project and the Vegas Freedom Fund. And so, sorry, I'm nervous too. Okay, so I'll just get into it. If we are successful at decriminalizing traffic offenses, which I believe we will be, many legislators on this call are in support of that, then it makes sense to also stop the suspension of driver's licenses for non-payment. Much like being issued a warrant, having to pay warrant fees, getting your license suspended and having to pay for reinstatement is another example of a penalty that causes harm to low-income families and communities, as the data shows, which we'd be more than happy. I'm not sure if the data has already been sent to you all, but if not, we can definitely get that research to you. Suspending driver's licenses perpetuates systemic harm to Black and Brown people in particular, but also to the broader working class. Last year, the state of Nevada declared systemic racism a public health crisis. This is an example of how laws contribute to the continuous disintegration of communities of color through systems that deepen debt for people who already could not afford it and prevent them from freely going to work, going to school, getting COVID tests, going to doctor's appointments, and otherwise simply living. Everyday people get stuck in this cycle that brings them in and out of the grasp of the criminal justice system as well, which we also know we're most impacted by. Research by UNLV students and the Fines and Fees Justice Center found that, quote, Black residents make up 12% of the city of Las Vegas and 46% of the city's traffic warrants. The numbers aren't much better for residents identified as Hispanic or Latinx. Together, Black and Brown people make up 2/3 of the city's traffic warrants. It's fair to assume that many of those same Black and Brown people with traffic warrants may have their licenses suspended. Again, further perpetuating the problem by keeping people in debt, unable to advance, living in fear of being pulled over, and running the risk of receiving more tickets. Failure to pay the court is not unequivocally indicative of how safe people actually drive on the road. These folks with warrants and license suspension are not criminals. They are more likely mothers and fathers, cousins, neighbors, who contribute directly to the growth and advancement of their communities every single day, and in fact contribute to public safety. Not being in financial compliance with the court does not remove someone's ability to be a safe and defensive driver and obey traffic laws. But on the flip side of that, a person's license being suspended actually can cause a ripple effect that could result in someone getting into a car accident and not having insurance because they are unable to get insured due to the license suspension. In 2021 in Nevada, driving is less of a privilege and more of a necessity. We have to recognize the reality that most people who do not pay traffic tickets don't do so due to lack of resources. In particular, over the last year, people have less access to resources and added barriers to going to the DMV. As you will hear from other speakers, a person can pay off their tickets in whole, still owe additional fees to the DMV to get their license reinstated, must retake the written and behind the wheel exam, which requires an appointment at a time when appointments are scarce and on average are 90 days out. From an economic standpoint, we must find new revenue streams for the government that do not center the state's poorest populations. Again, the research shows that traffic warrants come from the poorest zip codes, at least in Nevada. In Las Vegas. That seems like a very reasonable demand, although it will take some creativity to replace lost revenue. It must be done. What once seemed like a feasible punishment for failure to pay has negatively impacted the broader economic prosperity of not just individuals, but also the economic growth and prosperity of the broader community. According to the City of Phoenix Municipal Court's Compliance Assistance Program report, a suspended license not only limits mobility, thus limiting work possibilities, but lessens overall quality of life. Families experience reduced activities together and increased mental health and psychological impacts that cause strain to the family. Again, this report, I think it was sent to you all, but if not, we can get that to you. Government can and must to cause harm, meaning if a law inflicts harm to vulnerable populations and contributes to systemic racism, it must then be considered and investigated. Alternatives must be found. We supported ending license suspensions in the 2019 legislature, and I'm grateful that it's back on the table, and it will no doubt give relief to thousands of Nevadans across the state, eliminating a barrier for many people to safely and legally be on the road to school, to work. And as this pandemic comes to a yield, people can be on the road to restaurants and the Strip, a road towards prosperity, which every Nevadan deserves. If we truly want to deter people from speeding and running stop signs and increase safety on the road, I think we should talk to more drivers. There are people whose licenses have been suspended multiple times for failure to pay tickets. Many of these tickets were non-driving violations, such as expired plates or lapse of insurance, which again represents a financial issue, a black hole that can take decades for people to climb out of. AB 151 allows those folks most impacted to get a hand in climbing out of that hole. Free to Drive, which is a national campaign across the country, makes the following arguments. Driver's license suspensions cost people their livelihoods. 86% of Americans drive to work, and many jobs require a driver's license. Without a license, you can't take your children to school, buy groceries, or get the healthcare that you need. Suspending licenses cuts economic growth. People who can't work or who lose income due to a suspended license have less money to contribute to the economy, less money to pay off their initial fines and fees, leaving them saddled with court debt for years. License suspensions undermine public safety. When law enforcement uses valuable time to cite, stop, fine, and arrest people for driving on a suspended license due to unpaid fines and fees, they have less time to investigate and focus on crimes that endanger people's lives. All of these things are true, and I would also add that from my personal perspective, it also harms families. It causes mental anguish and contributes to the systemic issues that are rooted in the criminal justice system. If you've never had to drive with a warrant, without a license, or without registration, had to get rides, walk miles, or spend almost half of your waking hours on public transportation, you should talk to someone who has had to do it, and you will come to understand that more times than not, if people had the money to pay it all off and take care of it, and be in good standing, they would. We have the opportunity to significantly improve the lives of thousands of Nevadans during a pandemic when honestly, people just need a break. I urge you to give the people what they need and deserve by voting this bill out of committee and ultimately sending it on its path to become law. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Turner. Appreciate your testimony. So I think we have two others. Who is up next? Is it Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Okay, please go ahead.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of this committee for bringing and hearing AB 151 today. We are excited to be here on this bill. It's been a long time, a long road getting here. My name is Yvette Williams, and I am chair of the Clark County Black Caucus. And I would like to just especially thank Ms. Mosley for her work over the years. Many of you know this has been something that she has been leading the Black Caucus on as chair of the Judicial and Law Enforcement Committee for many years. And so I just want to acknowledge her today. The vast majority of Nevada driver's license suspensions are for traffic tickets that residents cannot afford to pay. Between July 2017 and June 2019, over 38,000 Nevadans had their driver's license suspended just because they couldn't afford to pay court fines and fees. That's an average of 53 Nevadans every day, many of them in your assembly district, and for some of you, the bulk live in yours, where you find large Black and brown communities. These are families that you represent, electorate that look to you for fair and just public policy. This cruel practice forces people to make an impossible choice, stop driving and lose access to work, children's schools or daycare, medical attention, and basic necessities, or keep driving and risk more fines and fees, arrest, or even incarceration. When Clark County Black Caucus hosted one of our educational events for fines and fees a few years ago, I recall one of our members who moved to Nevada and did not have family support and had a horrible experience. She picked up her young children from daycare and the other from school after work and heading home praying she wouldn't get stopped by police. She had an outstanding warrant for unpaid traffic fines and fees and was hoping to avoid police until she got her tax return. Once she received her tax return, she would be able to finally pay those fees that, by the way, had increased. But as luck would have it, just a few miles from her home, a police car appeared in her rearview mirror. And sure enough, the lights went on and instructed her to pull over. Similar to others in Nevada, she was put in handcuffs and taken away with her young children traumatized by seeing their mother in this state, crying uncontrollably, and mom unable to comfort them. Child protective custody would be called and her children also put into custody. You see, she had no family to call. She was all alone here in Vegas, which is common. This issue not only impacts drivers, but it also disproportionately impacts children, students of color, and then expected to perform in school after such an ordeal. It was her worst nightmare, she said, one her children still have never forgotten. It's time to end this harmful policy and restore Nevadans' freedom to drive and stop attempting to balance the budgets off unfair policies that criminalize good people and create hardships for Nevada families, and in particular, people of color, due to racial bias and police profiling. Not to mention the over-policing in Black and brown communities. Debt-based suspensions disproportionately impact communities of color. Data shows that Black and Hispanic people are more likely to be the subject of traffic enforcement and have their license suspended, despite comparable traffic violation rates. In 2015, the Las Vegas Review-Journal investigated law enforcement data and found that residents living in the 7 poorest statistically African-American Hispanic zip codes account for nearly 2/3 of traffic citations. I just want to repeat that. Statistically, African Americans and Hispanic zip codes account for nearly 2/3 of traffic citations. A 2017-2018 interim study by the Nevada State Legislature cites the 1980s recession as its primary reason for raising fines and fees for traffic violations, as it led Congress to cut approximately $40 billion from the 1982 budget. Prior, the average city in the U.S. did not rely on general revenues from fines and forfeitures, but by 2006, it was estimated that the average city generated 1.46% of its revenue from fines and increased to 2.24% in 2012. Further, in 2012, about 6% of cities in the U.S. collected more than 10% of their revenues in this matter. Nevada is one of the highest. Assembly Bill 151, sponsored by Assemblywoman Gonzalez and Assemblywoman Torres, will help thousands of safe drivers regain the freedom to drive by ending driver's license suspension when the underlying basis is unpaid minor traffic fines, fees, and assessment. We also ask that the sponsors in this committee please consider making reinstatements of driver's license retroactive to be fair. There are many people who still do not have their license today. As is consistent with many of the great social justice reform bills this legislature has passed in recent years. And just to be clear again, this bill does not eliminate suspensions and revocations based on dangerous driving, such as DUI, or relating to overdue child support. In closing, legislation like AB 151 has bipartisan national support. In the last 3 years, 14 states have passed reforms to curb license suspensions for unpaid fines and fees, missed hearing dates, or both. The Driving for Opportunity Act, introduced by Senators Chris Coons, a Democrat, and Roger Wicker, a Republican, will provide grants to states that do not suspend, revoke, or refuse to renew a driver's license of a person or registration of a motor vehicle for failure to pay a civil or criminal fine or fee. The grants would cover the cost of reinstating a driver's license previously suspended for unpaid fines and fees. It has bipartisan support from elected officials and over 50 key stakeholders. We hope Nevada will be amongst these leaders and pass AB 151 without hesitation. Some of those that support is from our own Nevada Attorney General Ford and 23 other state attorneys generals. And in support of this act, along with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the National District Attorneys Association, the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association, the National Urban League, Vision Zero, JP Morgan Chase, Instacart, and many, many more. Thank you, Representative Gonzalez, for the honor of working with you, and Chairman Yeager for allowing the Clark County Black Caucus to have a seat at the table today and centering voices most impacted by driver's license suspensions. And I wish you all a good day.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Williams. We appreciate it.
You're
I
welcome.
think we have one more. I think we have Ms. Moya Garay with us on the Zoom. So if you'd like to go ahead and unmute and provide your testimony, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Hello, members of the committee. My name is Yesenia Moya. Thank you so much for letting me speak today. Thank you to Cecilia and Leslie and Lisa and Yvette. I appreciate this time to speak. I've been a resident of Las Vegas for over 19 years. And AB 151 is personal for me. It is always harder to advocate for oneself, and I tend to speak from the heart and off the cuff, so I had to write this down. Sometimes the emotions overcome me and my message ends up incomplete, but I want to make sure that I am understood loud and clear about the nightmares that the existing traffic-related law has put me, my family, and this community through. It has kept us living in fear of driving out of pure necessity or because of an emergency. For working class Nevadans, it's often a decision between feeding your kids or paying a traffic ticket. Las Vegas is a sprawling city and a metro area that lacks simple access to public transportation, oftentimes making it impossible to move around the city without a car or access to cash for the bus, which sometimes can cost upwards of $120 a month if you're just paying for your 24-hour bus pass. I have spent upwards of 4 hours on buses while wasting 5 or more just walking or waiting for the next bus. Losing my driver's license did not just mean I lost the privilege of driving, as Nevada law calls it. It is a domino effect. For my sister, It resulted in her fighting a deportation case because she needed to pay for her family's rent and their food. For some of my friends, it's looking over their shoulder when they're trying to take their baby to school or go to work. December of last year proved to me that no matter how much I pay the courts, they will always want more. I was able to pay my traffic tickets that totaled $3,400 in December. But due to the irregular and unreliable communication between the court system and the DMV, I was unable to receive a COVID test when an officer pulled me over the very next week and took my plate. Even though my tickets were paid, and I showed him, and I tried to plead with him and talk to him, the DMV replaced them for free because they knew that this was wrong. But guess who again has to pay for the same thing? A traffic ticket for driving without a license. When all I was trying to do was take care of myself and my community. I want to know that when it's my turn to get a vaccine, that I can drive myself safely there. That any person in the Valley living in fear of this pandemic can and will be able to drive themselves and their families there safely. This is a public health crisis. From food deserts to inability to get health care. When was the last time that anyone here was forced to carry their groceries for 2 miles because they couldn't afford their traffic ticket? I urge members of the committee to support AB 151 with us and the rest of our community. I am tired of living in fear of being stopped because the cops need to fill their quota. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony this morning, Ms. Moya. We appreciate it. Assemblywoman Gonzalez, let me ask you, anything else you'd like to say before we go to questions, or are you and your team ready for questions?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Cecilia Gonzalez, Assembly District 16. No, we're concluding. That's the conclusion of our presentation, and so we're ready for questions.
Thank you so much to the 5 of you for presenting here this morning. I have a number of questions, so I'll just go with the list we have so far. I know that there will be more questions, but I'll start in this order. It'll be Assemblywoman Cohen, Assemblyman Wheeler, Assemblywoman Krasner, and then Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, and then we'll take additional questions. So please go ahead, Assemblywoman Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, ladies. I have a couple of questions, if that's okay, Chair. First, it's very good to see you again, Ms. Mosley, to see you back at the legislature. Can you go back and go through the collection rates in other cities that have done away with suspending licenses?
Absolutely. As you all are doing, I'm moving through tabs on my computer where I have this data open. But I wanted to highlight specifically California. What California has seen, and of course, California stopped the practice of suspending driver's license in 2018, I believe. And in the year following, they have seen about an 8.9% increase in on-time payments from folks with outstanding fines and fees. That's just one example. What we saw in Phoenix, Arizona, and Phoenix has the program that Ms. Williams highlighted, a program that would help people who had outstanding fines and fees get their driver's license reinstated. And what Phoenix has seen is not only the $1.49 million increase in their GDP that they've seen, they've also seen, hold on, I'm looking for some of my data. Sitting here. Many of the folks in Phoenix, about 76%, said they had an increase in mobility and they were able to now drive their family members around. They're able to get their kids to school. They were able to get people to work. They were able to get to the grocery store. They were able to get to doctor's appointments. As a result of their mobility, about 53% of those folks, and I know Ms. Cohen, you specifically talked about some of the increases in revenue and collection rate, but I think this is important to highlight because if people are able to get to work and they're able to pay, then we're going to see an increase in those rates of collections. And so about 53% of those people indicated that they were able to obtain new employment, and actually employment where they were able to increase their salary. 41% reported an increase in income as a result of that program through Phoenix, ranging from about $3,200 to $48,000 per person, with a median income of about $24,000. Let me see. Does that answer your question, Assemblywoman Cohen?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that.
And if I may for just a moment, Mr. Chair, please forgive me. I meant to address Ms. Cohen through you, if that's okay.
Yeah, you don't have to go through me. You can feel free to go to the member, but if you can, please just remember to state your name before you speak. That'll be helpful.
Will do. Lisa Mosley for the record.
And then if I can have a second question, Chair.
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So then my second question would be for any of you, and would have to do with the in lieu of paying fees, there's the option of community service. But what I'd like to know is I don't believe it's required, so if you can confirm that the court doesn't have to offer community service, and then also what the availability is of community service. I'm guessing it's limited because of COVID right now, but even before COVID, what was the accessibility of doing community service? And was that an easy process for people?
Thank you, Assemblywoman Cohen. Lisa Mosley for the record. I will attempt to answer your question. Though this is not AB 116 and Assemblywoman Wynn's bill, we do hope to address the disparities in community service. What we've seen in legislation in 2019, I believe it was AB 416 and both AB 434 addressed community service and I don't think, was it payment plans that you asked about, or was it specifically community service and the accessibility? We've seen that what some of the research has shown and what we've seen is that people aren't always able to work and perform the community service as outlined. And we also know that in 2019, the legislation required courts to do an ability to pay assessment. Well, we don't know if that ability to pay assessments is being applied uniformly across the state. And so we aren't seeing where people are having the opportunity to do community service. I know we talked with a couple of jurisdictions, particularly Las Vegas Justice Court. They do inability to pay assessment, and it's simply asking people that are in the court, are you able to pay these tickets? If they say no, then they ask them, would you like to do community service? We don't know if that standard is being applied across the board, so we really don't have a lot of data on who's doing community service, the availability of it, how accessible it is to people. So that's something we're hoping to work on with legislation this year also.
Thank you.
I might, Assemblywoman Cohen, if I might add to your question concerning Phoenix, I just want to put on the table as well.
Can you please just remember to state your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, Yvette Williams, Clark County Black Caucus. I just want to remind the committee as well that when Nevadans lose their job, it puts an additional strain on public services and resources that are available in the community. And folks who now may be receiving unemployment because they've lost their job as a result of all of this, now are applying for food stamps and they've lost their employment insurance coverage. So now they're putting more stress on our Medicaid programs and things like that. So when we think about how it impacts revenue in the state of Nevada, we have to be mindful of that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll go next to Assemblyman Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Assemblyman Wheeler, District 39 for the record. I was listening with interest, and I think Assemblywoman Cohen's question and your answer to that kind of touched on what I wanted to talk about. But I'd like to go back. Ms. Mosley said that this is happening to people that are unable to pay. Ms. Turner from Plan said that this was only happening to people with lack of resources. And then so on and so on. I don't want to go into everything. So I looked it up, and I looked up 176.064, and it says that the court determines that the defendant has the ability to pay the amount due and is willfully avoiding the payment. So it seems to me that kind of has to happen before they can suspend the license on the person. So I'm wondering, is this happening to people who, what are the consequences going to be here? And aren't we taking away judicial discretion and removing from our third branch of government discretion to say, you know, this person doesn't have the ability to pay, but he did break the law, so we'll give him community service, or it wasn't that bad. He doesn't have the ability to pay, or she, suspend the fine. We're taking that discretion away by telling the courts what to do here and basically blaming it on, you know, something we don't know for sure because every case is different, and that's what the judge is here for.
Lisa Mosley for the record. Assemblyman Wheeler, thank you for the question, first of all. And we are sensitive to that issue. We've thought about that. And again, what we've seen, what the research shows is that when barriers are taken away, when people are able to pay their court fines and fees, they do. The data from other jurisdictions around the country support that. I cited California. When California stopped suspending driver's licenses for unpaid fines and fees, they saw an increase in revenue of 8.9%. I think that's pretty significant. And the research just does not support that people are simply scofflaws and they just want to escape the law. I'm not going to pay this. It's more of an ability to pay and an inability, I should say, to pay. As I mentioned, the zip codes that have the highest numbers of citations, warrants, and if warrants, we can assume driver license suspensions also have the highest rates of unemployment. They have the highest rates of food insecurity, which means these people are hungry, which means they're struggling. They also have the lowest median incomes, which means they don't have the income to pay for these fines and fees. But it's not that they're unwilling. Another thing that I would also like to point out is in past efforts in our own city of Las Vegas and probably across the state, we've seen amnesty programs where jurisdictions do a few times a year. Well, if people have outstanding fines and fees, they can come in on a particular day, they can get their court fees waived, they can get their warrants fees waived in many cases. And we've seen, and I'm sorry, I don't have any absolute numbers on this, but we've seen how many people show up to these events and how much collection rates actually go up when people are able to pay their fees. So removing this driver license suspension, removing these barriers makes it so people can pay. And it's not that people don't want to pay. And we keep processing it through that lens and saying people just simply don't want to pay. Well, the research doesn't support that. It supports the fact that people simply are not able to pay because they don't have the income. Thank you. I hope I addressed your question.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley. Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair Yeager has stepped out to present his bill. So yes, go ahead though.
Follow up, Madam Vice Chair. Thank you. Ms. Mosley, yeah, thank you for your answer, but you really didn't address the question. Once again, you say that the people don't have the ability to pay. So what, and I understand what you're saying, I really do. But what I'm saying here is that the judge should take that into account. So apparently what you're saying to me is judges don't take it into account. So we've got to slap them down and make sure that we take their discretion away, even though they may be an elected official, and they, will do it the way we want to do it.
Thank you for your question,
Hello.
Lisa Mosley, for the record. Thank you again, Assemblyman Wheeler. It's not the intention of this bill to slap down anyone. As of 2019, there was legislation that mandated that courts do an ability to pay assessment before suspending someone's driver's license. Well, the data that we have received from the DMV in Nevada shows that even after that law went into place, We would think that driver's license, as a result of this law, driver license suspensions would have gone down. Courts were doing an ability to pay assessment since if people cannot pay. But in many cases, Assemblyman Wheeler, we saw those driver license suspension rates actually go up versus going down. And I don't think that it's because judges don't want to do the assessment. I mean, they have a lot of cases on their dockets, and I think it's more, we need some uniformity across the board. That's what I think we need, just more uniformity in the way these processes are enacted. And those are the facts. Again, we've seen in many cases, those driver's license suspensions actually go up, which supports the fact that maybe some courts are not doing an ability to pay assessment.
Thank you, ma'am. We're going to have to agree to disagree on that one.
I believe that Ms. Moya had a comment to make, and so I'm going to turn it over to her. I think it's kind of in response to maybe some of your questions.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead and state your name for the record before you speak.
Okay. Hello, my name is Yesenia Moya Garay for the record. I would like to say that I have never actually seen a judge for any of my traffic tickets. The only times that I have had access to any person was either at the window when they told me that I had to pay, or over the phone where the enforcement officer told me that I had to come in and I couldn't pay over the phone. I was not allowed to, and hung up on. I have never had a pay assessment, nor has the courts reached out to me. I haven't had access to information. When I asked an enforcement officer over the phone if I could see somebody about my ticket, and she told me no. So I'm not sure if my experience is the same as other folks, but I can probably say and talk for myself in the fact that this process isn't being done correctly. And a lot of the times folks show up to these warrant quashing clinics and end up pleading NOLO, not understanding what it means. So there's a lot of lack of access, lack of education. There's a true power dynamic here at play where they just assume, since folks are not educated, that they won't follow up. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Ms. Moya. I understand what you're saying, but just so you know, I believe any of the attorneys on this panel here will be able to tell you that you can demand a trial for that. Also, just so you know, there's no such thing as police quotas. Doesn't happen. Thank you.
Assemblyman Wheeler, I can also reach out. I know that I have a bill that I'm also working on in this kind of general area. And I've been working with a lot of the counties and municipalities, and I can see whether or not they can pull the data on how many people, as well as the court system, to see how many people actually appear before judges, and also kind of get some of that data for you, if that would be helpful.
That'd be very helpful, Madam Vice Chair. Thank you very much. I'd love to see how many actually request a court hearing, and how many don't, and how many that request actually get one.
I'll see what I can find out in that area for you.
Yeah, because if they don't get one, that's something we definitely have to fix.
Next, I have up on the list Assemblywoman Krasner.
Thank you, Vice Chair Wynn, and thank you for your presentation. I understand what our presenters are saying about people's inability to pay a fine or fee, and how that really can cause a hardship on their family, and that doesn't seem fair. I can see in Section 1, suspension of a driver's license for failure to pay a minor traffic offense. I agree with you there. That doesn't seem fair. I can even understand Section 3. People shouldn't have to pay a fee for reinstatement of their driver's license, because again, that goes to ability to pay, and that's not fair. We want everyone to have equal justice for all, regardless rich or poor. But Section 2, failure to appear in court, not understanding how somebody's failure to appear in court, and then we no longer allow the court to notify the DMV. How does that failure to appear in court relate to an inequity in somebody's amount of money they have or they feel like a background.
I don't know if I'm the only one, but I believe that you're having some audio issues, Assemblywoman Krasner. I'm going to go ahead and have broadcast services see if they can kind of correct some of that. And then I will travel back around because I could not make out anything that you just said. I don't know if anyone else had that same problem, but I want to make sure that we get your question answered. So broadcast services, if we can help Assemblywoman Krasner, that would be wonderful. And I will swing back around because there are some more questions and I want to make sure that we get yours asked. So with that, if we could go to Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Thank you, Vice Chair Nguyen. Good morning to our presenters. Ms. Mosley, thank you so much for the information. If you could just list, you may have it on top of your head, and I think I know the answer, but if you would just list the 5 top zip codes that are have the highest number of warrants and fines and fees, if you've got that information.
Lisa Mosley, for the record, thank you, Assemblywoman Armstrong. I do happen to have that data handy. Of course, as we suspected, a zip codes 89101, zip codes 89106, zip codes 89108, zip codes 89110, and zip codes 89130. Those are, I won't say coincidentally, also the zip codes that have the lowest median incomes. 89101 has a median income of $25,101. 89106 has a median income of $30,444. 89108 has a median income of $46,759. 89110 has a median income of $44,406. 89030 has a median income of $35,484. Thank you.
Vice Chair, if I may follow up, please.
Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mosley, for being Johnny on the spot with that information. 3 of those zip codes are partially in Assembly District 6. This is a real issue for a community that, at least in 89106, which encompasses Ward 5 in Las Vegas, which is where I live, and which is also part of Assembly District 6, has been experiencing 15% unemployment, which is over 3 times the state average before COVID, for years. And I just believe that this legislation brings some compassion and understanding into an issue that our community has experienced for a long time. Whether there is agreement or not, I live in a community that I see with my own 2 eyes that is heavily policed all the time. Whether there are quotas that are actually spoken out loud to the public or are internal, we see a significant amount of policing in our community. And I think that that is part of the reason that we see such high numbers of ticketing for these, kinds of just non-lethal, minor traffic infractions. I will never forget, I was at the city of Las Vegas a while ago to attend a hearing, and I'm walking back to my car, and the police are ticketing a car that is parked in a paid slot at City Hall. The young lady walks out with her children to her vehicle, and I said, "Oh my goodness, is your meter expired?" She said, "No, my meter is not expired. My insurance or my tags are expired on her car." She was not moving. Her car was parked in stationary. but she was still given a ticket. This is the type of, and that was in zip code 89101, which is also part of Assembly District 6. So we have to be honest if we choose to be. People don't have to be, but I would appreciate if people were honest about what is going on here. Honest to the fact that these communities of Black and Brown people, people who are poor, who are trying to find work, who are struggling, seem to be the target. They're not going to get attorneys. They can't afford them. So that is why they are except going to the window to try and get help. And so I'm just grateful that you all are here today to talk about this. I'm grateful that you are shining light on a truth. And I'm hopeful that the Assembly and the Senate will see the benefits of this to our community and support legislation that truly helps regular working people. We just want an opportunity to live in peace and do the right thing. And thank you so much, Vice Chair, for the time.
Thank you for sharing your experiences in your district and personally. I appreciate that. Next up, we have Assemblywoman Hardy.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, and thank you for this presentation today. I'm learning a lot. So my questions are a little along a different line. If you could, and maybe there's too many to like list them all, but if you could just give me some examples. I know you mentioned speeding, running a stop sign. What are minor traffic violations? And like I said, if it's, a lot of them, you don't have to give me all of them, but just some examples. And then what are kind of like the average fines for those type of violations? And then I'd have a follow-up. That's okay.
Leslie Turner for the record. I would say that in my community, the most tickets are usually for things that involve financial resources, such as failure to have registration, failure to have insurance, driving without a driver's license because the driver's license is suspended because of previous tickets for the things that I just mentioned. So driving without a driver's license, that ticket is $400 plus. It depends on how many times you've gotten that ticket. And the ticket for insurance and registration is $800 and up. And again, it goes up depending on how many times you've been ticketed for that. So that if you get it pulled over and you don't have registration and your license is suspended, that right there can be $1,200 easy. That obviously a person from one of the poorest districts in the state is not going to be able to pay. And then if you get on a payment plan, and this is, every jurisdiction varies, but if you get on a payment plan, and say you're paying $50 a month and you don't have that $50 that month, then you're at risk of going into warrant status. And then that is how people end up in jail. And then also when it goes into a warrant status, that's also an additional fine, a bench warrant fee that you also have to pay, which is $150 per ticket. So if you, in one kind of interaction, you can get 3 tickets, that's $150 per ticket because it went into bench warrant because you missed a payment or you weren't able to keep up with your payments. And so it creates this cycle of debt that people just cannot get out of. And then I also just wanted to add that a lot of the times these are not moving violations. The data shows that. These are kind of, I don't know the word for it, but basically these are tickets that don't actually reflect your ability to drive. You're not recklessly driving. You're not speeding or running stop signs, which, I'm not saying that never happens, but for the most part, it's people who it's things that they can't afford to pay for.
And Assemblywoman Hardy, just to follow up, they are laid out in statute what is considered minor traffic. Additionally, what I think Ms. Turner was referring to is in practice, they're called like fix-it tickets, like broken taillights, failure to display your license plate appropriately, those type of things. And I'm sure you have, Assemblyman O'Neill, might be able to give you some more information about that as well. But I will, do you have any follow-up questions as well? I believe you did.
Yeah, just one. And yeah, thank you for that, because I just kind of wanted to get an idea in my head of what things we're talking about. And like you said, you had mentioned, obviously it doesn't include DUIs and things like that, the more serious. So I just want to get an idea in my head. So, and then just to clarify, this bill would remove the ability to suspend for infractions like that. So do the fines, do they go away, or are they still like required to pay them, or they're gonna, they could do the amnesty program you mentioned. It's just that they're not getting their license suspended. Do I understand that correctly?
This is Lisa Mosley for the record. Assemblywoman Hardy, thank you. I'm gonna hopefully answer your question. What we hope to do with this bill is not remove the fines. What we want to do is remove the ability of the courts to suspend. We're hoping, not with this bill, but with other legislation, to put in practice a civil system. And also, let me point out that people who have tickets can get on a payment plan. They can pay these tickets. But I want to go back to something that Ms. Turner touched on, but I also want to try to address your first question. You talked about what were some of the violations that we see that people get tickets for. And though I don't have the fee schedule in front of me, I think Ms. Turner did a good job of laying out what some of those fines look like. We'd worked with some UNLV students in their sociology department who did some research for us on warrants. And again, this is not a warrants bill, but it stands to reason that if people have warrants, then the next step is their license suspensions. The top 10 reasons that they found for traffic warrants had absolutely nothing to do with public safety or driving. They were things for driving without a valid license. 15.7% of traffic warrants issued were for driving without a valid license, having no proof of insurance, driving on a suspended or license plates, driving on a revoked or canceled license, an unregistered trailer, if you can believe that, public parking, expired license plates, no driver's license in possession. And so also, when someone requests a payment plan, I want to just briefly talk about some of the fees and going back to the inability, what creates the inability to pay in many cases. When someone requests a payment plan, most jurisdictions charge a fee to initiate a payment plan. And the data that we have received from some jurisdictions, the fee can be as low as $50. It can be as much as $100. There's also a fee if you, as Ms. Turner mentioned, going into warrant status, if your violations go into warrant status, before you can pay on that violation, you now have to pay warrant fees. And those warrant fees range anywhere from $150 to, in some cases, $400. And so before you can pay on that violation, you have to pay those warrant fees. So as you can see, this is what creates the large amount of debt that we see. It's not always the initial violation, it's the fees and assessments. And also there's a assessment that's applied to traffic violations and misdemeanors, which these are all misdemeanors, by the way. There's an assessment that's fine. So when you start stacking up all of these fees and these additional charges, then you see it creates the amount of debt. And once somebody gets in that cycle, it's nearly impossible for them to get out of. And so I hope that with that, I've answered your question. I know I said a lot, but I just wanted to point that out to you.
No, I appreciate you expanding on that. And I can see how these build up, and it gets out of the ability to pay. So, I'd be interested in further conversations, like you said, about, how do we, help the people pay the fines without the suspension and, there's still, their ability and what they can do to be accountable and pay, but not be restricted by the suspension and whatnot. So thank you very much for your information.
Thank you. And I'd encourage all of our members. I know that there's substantial research that's been done nationally through NCSL, which is a nonpartisan organization for state legislators. So feel free to reach out to them as well. I know that they have been a really good resource for providing a lot of this reform in the area of citations and civil infractions, and have a lot of it. So there. Next, I will try to go with Assemblywoman Krasner. I believe she's on the phone, so at least we have some good audio from her. So I want to make sure she's able to ask her question. Hello, can you hear me?
Assemblywoman Krasner, this is broadcast. If we could have you, we might have to have you leave your computer audio so we do not get any feedback. I will work with you on this side if the vice chair would like to continue for another moment.
Okay. We'll get there, Assemblywoman Krasner. I know it. What was I going to say? Let's go next to, oh, excuse me, Assemblyman O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And I want to start off, I appreciate the intent and I really appreciate the conversation we're having. Assemblywoman Gonzalez has brought forth an interesting bill. Look at the discussion that it's brought forth. I think we could spend quite some time on dealing with this. But if I may, Ms. Mosley, for a woman that was nervous, you sure don't show it. I do not want to play poker with you. But help me understand, when you were testifying, you said that Fort Worth does not have the suspension and Dallas does. Fort Worth has a better collection rate. Do I understand that Texas allows the localities, the local jurisdictions to decide whether to, what program they want to go with? Is first, I'm sort of laying a foundation because I have another question depending on how that comes out.
Lisa Mosley, for the record. Thank you for the question, Assemblyman O'Neill. And it's nice to meet you. You're one of the assembly members that I haven't had the opportunity or the pleasure of meeting. Texas is one of the states that has stopped suspending driver's licenses. And thank you for that question. I have the data for Fort Worth and Dallas, Texas, and I shared that with you earlier. If you'd like me to repeat it, I can. I am not clear on how the other jurisdictions are implementing that. And so I can tell you that I can get that data for you. And I'm sorry that I don't have it all in front of me now, but I can certainly get that for you because it is an interesting point. Does that help?
Yeah, it may. I'm just trying to understand how one jurisdiction does suspend and the other one doesn't.
Well, there's a program that Fort Worth uses, and I'm looking for the one of the million tabs that I have open with that data. There's a program that Dallas uses, which they suspend through, and Fort Worth doesn't. And this was for this is for the year immediately following the implementation of this law. So this may have been some data from before that. So I'm sorry, Mr. Assemblywoman O'Neill, I'm getting a little nervous and I'm trying to find this data for you.
Please don't, because here's what I was trying to get to is what is the carrot? I always use the term carrot and stick. What's the incentive then that you said California increased their payment rates?
8.9%.
Yes. So what incentivized those individuals? It just can't be that I had a job, because you said during amnesty days, people come in and pay. So they know that they have to pay. I'm trying to learn what's the incentive. If you're not going to lose your license, if there's no penalty or no detractor attached to not paying the fines, as much as I like to believe in the goodness of people, I find it difficult to believe that they go ahead and pay their fines just out of goodness of their heart is what I'm going to. And I guess with that, I heard you say about how we need to, or maybe I misunderstood you or misquoting, maybe we should also look at requiring or tightening up the requirement of the amnesty or the partial payment or the payment plan program, and requiring the courts be more attentive to that before we go to suspension. So I know it's a confusing question. I need, what's the incentive? What's the carrot and stick here? And could it actually just be by forcing the courts to be more attentive to the income of the party and instituting payment plans?
Lisa Mosley, for the record. Assemblyman O'Neill, again, thank you for that question. I appreciate the dialogue with you. I'm going to use a phrase that we've used many times over the years, that the numbers don't lie.
Right.
And we have, the research shows, as I've mentioned, that when barriers are removed, people want to pay. We have processed this through the lens of people's unwillingness to pay. As I said earlier, it's premised on the belief that people just don't want to play, that somehow they're scofflaws and they just want to escape the system. But the data simply does not support that. And perhaps it's us in our thinking and having to rethink how we look at this issue. The data does support that. People want to pay. California has seen an increase. Phoenix has seen an increase in their collection rates. And though this is not related to driver license suspensions, I want to highlight our city, Carson City. Carson City stopped issuing warrants for drivers for unpaid fines and fees in 2019. Since they implemented that, and this is not suspended, this is warrants. Since they implemented that, Carson City has seen an increase in collections of revenue assessed versus what's collected of 8.5% on average per month. So it also stands to reason that if people aren't getting warrants, then they're not getting suspended. People do want to pay. We see that with the warrants program, the amnesty programs, the warrant quashing programs that we've seen. We see that in the data. People do want to pay. We think that people simply don't want to pay their fines fees, but I don't believe that's the case. And Assemblyman O'Neill, I do believe in the goodness of people. I do believe that people are good, are responsible. It's the premise of our country. We raise our children to be responsible and take responsibility for their actions. This is what this country is built on. So I do believe in the goodness of people. And I believe that without these barriers in place, people will want to pay their fines and fees because they want to take responsibility and contribute to their society. So I do believe in that.
I agree. I like to believe in the goodness of people, but I'm still having trouble with the carrot and stick. How did they incentivize? So I appreciate the time. I will contact Carson since it's a local jurisdiction. I'll talk to the judges, also the DAs.
Yes.
See where they feel that there needs to be no stick on this.
Lisa Mosley, again, for the record, Assemblyman O'Neill, let me try to answer. What we're seeing is that when the courts has stopped suspending licenses, when they take away or waive, in many cases, the additional fees, and people can just pay on their fine, that they pay it. The research shows that. Those are facts. The research simply shows that. So perhaps we don't really need a stick or a carrot for people to pay. We believe that if we take away your ability to drive or issue a warrant or something like that, that's going to force you to pay. The data does not show that. In fact, what it shows is when those barriers are in place, courts do not collect the revenue that they have assessed. We actually, Fines and Fees Justice Center, I do have some data to show that. I don't have it in front of me. I can certainly submit it to the committee if you'd like to look at it. When courts have warrants, when they have suspensions in place, it limits the ability of people who have been assessed fines and fees to pay. That's a fact. I have that data. When those things are removed, that is the incentive, providing a way for people to be able to pay. That if there has to be an incentive, that would be it.
Ms. Mosley, I'm gonna cut you off here because I know we have at least one more question, I believe, and I'm gonna ask Assemblyman O'Neill to kind of follow up offline, and if there are some additional documentation and research, I know we could be here forever talking about this, and I'm glad we're having this conversation, but I do want to make sure that we get to everyone, and then we get to our public comment and testimony and support, opposition, and neutral on the bill. So I believe next we have Assemblywoman Hanson. I don't know if she has her question ready to go or if she wants to take it offline.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Actually, some of my questions were answered, but I really appreciate the presentation, and Assemblywoman Gonzalez, my first time, you put me to shame. You were so polished and did a great job. And all of you presenters, I know this is nerve-wracking.
for you and for all of us, especially in this virtual space. So I had several questions, some got answered. Certainly, I'm very sympathetic. I was raised by a single mom, and we were in this position years and years ago. So my sympathies are there. And what I try to do as a person, as a mom, I've always, and what I try to do here on this committee is to weigh mercy and justice. I think that is the sweet spot we always are trying to find. And I think there is room for both in this situation. What I've had some concerns with that I've learned today is the fee structures, the assessments, those things. I want people to be accountable. I do think that's important. And so I really did want to explore more the community service side of it. When a person can't pay, or if they're on a payment plan, that's good. But when I heard what some of these fees are, now certainly, full disclosure, I have a lead foot. I have 38,000 square miles in my district. I've been pulled over numerous times, and those fees are high. But what really concerned me was when we talked about some of the most common, the registration, the insurance, the no driver's license, it almost as if there's a racking of fees. That worries me. And perhaps there's room to visit, maybe not in this bill, but in the future. Do we figure out a way that these fees are not so exorbitantly high? Because I can see how this would be very discouraging, particularly in the economic, median incomes we've been talking about. So actually, a lot of this is a comment, but let me dial it in. Clarify, community service is an option, can't pay now. And also, if they're on a payment plan, does the suspension stop if they are current with the payment plan?
Lisa Mosley, for the record, community service is an option. And in 2019, I believe AB 434, I believe it was, put in place two things. One was the ability to pay assessment that courts are supposed to use to determine a defendant's ability to pay, and also the option to perform community service in lieu of paying cash for their fines and fees. What we have seen again is that we don't know if there's uniformity across the state in all of the jurisdictions in applying that law. We don't know. We don't have any data to show that courts are uniformly applying this. Community service, we do know that some courts are offering community service. Initially, for instance, I referenced Las Vegas Justice Court. From what I understand from Las Vegas Justice Court, when someone comes to their window, as Ms. Moya mentioned, they don't always go before a judge, but when they go to the window, the first question, as I understand, Las Vegas Justice Court asks them, are they able to pay their fines and fees? If they say no, they're asked if they'd like to do community service. That's a shining example. We don't know if that standard is being applied across the board. Fines and Fees Justice Center has submitted language for legislation that would make payment plans uniform. It would waive some of the initiation fee for a payment plan. And we've also asked about community service. I will highlight again Texas. Texas has put in place a model of community service that I think it's something we could look at implementing here in the state. What Texas has done is they've expanded the definition of what qualifies as community service. For example, if someone who has been assessed fines and fees is already volunteering at their child's school, or if they may already be in a particular court-ordered program, let's say anger management or drug programs or something, Texas allows that to serve as community service, premised on the fact that we are making people better members of their community through these programs. So they are allowing that to serve as community service. That's not in this bill, but that is something that we hope to work on this session also. That would also provide some relief. And did I answer your question, Assemblywoman?
You did, and I was all over the place. Lots of information. Appreciate your expertise. And thank you, Madam Vice Chair, for the indulgence.
No problem. I know that we've had a broad discussion about this, and I think it's needed and I think it's necessary. Again, for the members of the committee, if you have any other follow-up questions, Ms. Mosley, Assemblywoman Gonzalez, Ms. Turner, and Ms. Moya, I'm sure would be able to do that. So we are going to move on to testimony in support, opposition, and neutral of Assembly Bill 151. I'm going to remind everyone that to clearly state and spell your name, please limit your testimony to 2 minutes. We will be timing each speaker to ensure that everyone is given a fair opportunity to speak. I can see here we have quite a few callers on the line prepared to testify, so I would do that. Please feel free, if you hear someone say what you have to say, saying ditto or same, I agree with the previous caller is perfectly fine. And if you have additional testimony that you want to provide, you have within, I believe, 48 hours of the close of this hearing to present that testimony. So broadcast services, if we can go to our callers in support of Assembly Bill 151.
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 151, press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, they are lining up in the queue, just waiting for the rest of them. Once again, to testify in support of AB Bill 151, press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Would the caller with the last 3 digits of 209 please slowly state and then spell your name for the record, and you will have 2 minutes and may begin now.
My name is Ashley, A-S-H-L-E-Y, White, W-H-I-T-E. Good morning. My name is Ashley. I'm here to support AB 151. I believe this bill would be beneficial in many ways. Some individuals are already out here struggling with a job and just everyday life. A simple traffic violation is not a reason to go to jail. To practice criminalization of poverty seems to be extreme and unfair. It creates a vicious cycle with snowball effects that destroys lives and ruins careers and sometimes people. Individuals need careers and jobs to support and take care of their family. People work hard to go to school to obtain degrees and licenses, and to lose that all for something that really is not a crime is very unfair. I know personally I have times that I have struggled with life due to lack of employment, and especially with COVID-19 right now. But to think that due to a suspended license, I could lose all of my degrees and licenses along with my career, then go to jail to lose my kids and now have a criminal record is very scary. I have worked very hard to be able to provide the life my children and I have, along with many other individuals. This situation could happen to any of us at any given time. My mother was personally impacted. She got a parking ticket and at a time was unable to pay due to being unemployed, and was given the opportunity for community service and completed it, went back to court and was told she did it at the wrong place, even though that's where the court had sent her. The judge asked her if she was able to pay, and she said no because she was still employed, and the judge sent her right to jail for the first time in her life. She has been very mentally impacted behind that. I think passing AB 151 would relieve a lot of worry, fear, and stress from individuals. It would also make things a lot more effective and successful. Instead of destroying lives, let us help individuals that really need the help. Thank you.
Broadcast services, if we can go to the next caller in support.
Would the caller with the last 3 digits of 725 please slowly state and then spell your name for the record? You will have 2 minutes and may begin now. Caller with the last 3 digits of 725, please press *6 now to unmute yourself and slowly state and spell your name for the record.
Hello, and thank you. Second time was the chime there. Thank you, Vice Chair Wynn and committee members. This is Nick Shepak, Nickshe, PACK Policy and Program Associate with the ACLU of Nevada. We stand in strong support of AB 151 and thank Assemblywoman Gonzalez for bringing forth this fantastic piece of legislation. The number of people impacted by debt-based driver's license suspension in the state between 2017 and 2019 bears repeating. It's more than 38,000. Research shows that on average, 40% of people who face license suspension lose their jobs. This criminalization of poverty must end in the state. The pandemic has only exacerbated these issues, with hundreds of thousands of jobs being lost either permanently or temporary throughout the state. People have been forced to search for work further and further from home. Our public transportation systems in the state leave much to be desired. Buses do not always arrive on time or stop where people live or need to go. Add to that the fear and danger of contracting COVID in closed, confined spaces. Public transportation can also be dangerous for vulnerable individuals who often have to ride home alone at dark after work. As rent and home prices skyrocket in much of Nevada, commuting to work has become much more common practice. In Assembly District 39, where my parents live and work, many minority low-wage casino and hospitality workers commute from the valleys to the lake 5 or more days a week. They have seen their hours cut and have been placed in situations where they may have to choose between paying minor traffic tickets and putting food on the table or keeping the lights on. A lack of financial resources should not be a barrier to maintaining work. This is also a public safety issue. As we know, some people will choose to drive without a license and thus uninsured if their other option is the loss of their employment. For Nevada's economy, for struggling Nevadans, for racial justice, and for the safety of the state, we urge you to support AB 151. Thank you.
Broadcast Services, can we go to the next caller in support?
Would the caller with the last 3 digits of 826 slowly state your name and then spell your name for the record? You will have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Good morning. My name is Ayana, Ayanna, and I too support this bill, AB 151. I was incarcerated for 100 days because of a suspended driver's license, which happened because I was shot in the neighborhood that I lived in, and I was in a cast, and it went into warrant. I had proof verifiable, but because it went into a warrant, it accrued more fees. The cost of housing me for that 100 days superseded the amount of the fine that I was charged for the suspended driver's license. It's way past time to look at these laws in a different lens, because during that time, one of my children was hurt for that 100 days, and if we're still dealing with the trauma of what happened that many years ago, it is definitely past time, and I'm in full support of this because it will help mothers, single mothers, and people who are obligated to pay, and if possible, to do community service, but not be hurt. Because after completing the 100 days, I still had to pay a fine to have my driver's license reinstated. It did not go away because it was applied to my credit. So that was a double standard because I had to do the time and still pay the fine afterwards. So therefore, it would behoove all of us to revisit and look at these laws through a different lens and stop preventing people to elevate when they desire to work and do other things, which warrants and fines will prevent if we just don't have it clearly stated. And again, we're Nevada strong, we're battle born, we can do better. And with that, I close. Thank you.
Thank you. And if we can go to the next caller in support.
Would the caller with the last 3 digits of 346 slowly state your name and then spell your name for the record? You will have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Hello, my name is Brendan Becker, spelled Brendan, and last name is Becker. I'm calling in support of AB 151. I wanted to show my support because I believe this bill would be greatly beneficial to many people, especially people with disabilities, because already it's in the city, it's already hard to navigate with public transportation, especially with the public city bus, and also with the RTC bus as well. With the RTC and city bus, it can be quite costly, and if they don't have, and if they can't rely on someone with a driver's license, then they couldn't really navigate anywhere. And also with that, they could like lose many. They could lose access to many things, such as their prescriptions or doctor visits or many things like that. And so I'm hoping this bill gets passed, and I'm hoping that this will be fixed soon. Thank you all.
Thank you, BPF. Can we go to the next caller?
With the caller with the last 3 digits of 499, please slowly state and then spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and you may begin now.
Hello, my name is Jody, Jodi Hocking, Hocking. Good morning, Assembly members. As you know, I'm the founder of Return Strong Families United for Justice, but today I'm here to speak from a more personal perspective, one that's extremely uncomfortable but needs to be said. 15 years ago, I was a single mom, raising 2 kids on my own and struggling to maintain. During the recession, I worked low-wage jobs and every side job I could hustle up. My significant other was incarcerated and everything was left on me. Someone gave me a vehicle so that I could get back and forth to work, but the car wouldn't pass inspection in New York at the time. The failed inspection was due to something I couldn't afford to fix, but it was the only way to get to work. For years, I drove that car illegally. We called it the death trap, actually, but I didn't have any other choice. When you're living with your back against the wall, sometimes you make decisions out of survival that you wouldn't make if you had actual choices. There was no public transportation. It was a 45-minute drive to my job. There were no closer jobs, and I couldn't pay rent or feed my kids without it. Ultimately, all of the problems led to the suspension of my driver's license and consequently my insurance. Yet I had no choice but to continue to drive. Often, I heard people say you had a choice, but sometimes there really just aren't. I didn't need a carrot or a stick. I only needed to be able to have the financial resources to pay the tickets and repairs in order to be able to keep the car functioning legally. I want to take this one step further. I'm white. Driving with a suspended license and no insurance or registration eventually did lead to me being pulled over one night. My story is very different than the others who have told their story. The officer did give me a ticket and tow the car, but he also gave me a ride home. When I wrote the courts, because I knew how to use the system, the tickets were dropped. I never paid a penny, and my license was, the suspension was ended. That's white privilege. If I had been black or brown, I would have gone to jail or worse. In my panic, I could have alarmed an officer and not lived through that encounter. I'm in support of AB 151 for many reasons, but simply put, because it removes barriers to driving for people that keep people trapped in poverty. Second, no one should be worrying about warrants or jail over license suspension, over fees that they can't pay. And third, any law should ensure that it is fair to all and doesn't provide opportunity for white and or wealthy people to have a different level or access to justice by their natural born privilege, while black, brown, and poor people literally can give their lives and freedom for it. Assemblymember O'Neill, you made a comment earlier about not believing in the goodness of people wanting to pay. I'm going to assume something different. The goodness of people's intent who have resources is no different than the people who don't have resources. The only difference is what they have and their ability to pay. Let's apply the same principles of goodness to all black, brown, and poor people as well.
Broadcast services, can we go to the next caller?
With the caller with the last 3 digits of 080, please slowly state and then spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Hi, Jim Hoffman, Nevada Attorneys for Criminal Justice. We support this bill for the reasons that many other people have already given. We think it's great. I just wanted to address specifically Assemblyman O'Neill's question about carrots and sticks. I think there is a stick in the law already. The stick is that if you don't pay your fines, it goes into collections. So you have debt collectors calling you and hounding you and annoying you. And then if you don't pay for a long enough time, it gets turned into a civil judgment, and the civil judgment goes on your credit record, and then it's harder for you to rent an apartment or get a car loan or all of this other stuff. So we already have these sticks in the existing law. AB 151 would not get rid of those, so there would still be a good incentive for people to pay their fines. And hopefully that addresses your concerns. But as we said, this is a great bill and we support it. Thank you.
Would the caller with the last 3 digits of 318 please slowly state your name and then spell your name for the record? You will have 2 minutes and you may begin now.
Kendra Bertie, Kendra Bertschy. Good morning, Madam Vice Chair and members of the Assembly Judiciary Committee. I'm with the Washoe County Public Defender's Office, and we support AB 151 because it is one step towards ending the criminalization of poverty. Suspending licenses to punish someone's inability to pay fines and fees is counterproductive and leads to costly consequences for Nevada citizens. Regarding Assemblyman Wheeler's question, as a public defender, I know firsthand that unfortunately not every court conducts a hearing before first issuing the warning or the warrant and arresting someone for their suspension and suspending their license. Some courts will issue the warrant first and suspend the license first, and then after that person is arrested, they will hold a hearing. It is heartbreaking and frustrating when we have to meet a new client, a community member, at jail, in custody, because they were simply trying to drive to work and earn a living for their family. They wanted to pay their fines and fees, but the fees just kept increasing, and they had to make that difficult decision as whether to use their limited resources, the paycheck that they earned, on housing, on keeping a roof over their heads, foods in their family's mouths, or to pay their fine. And unfortunately, the choice they made was to protect themselves and their family. Suspension isn't an option to threaten people. That works. The data shows that it's ineffective and rather has that crippling effect on our community members, which keeps them from engaging with the court. A driver's license suspension for failure to pay creates a vicious cycle of crushing debt and prolonged involvement with the legal system. Thank you for your time and attention today.
Thank you, Ms. Bertie. If we can go to our next caller in support.
Would the caller with the last 3 digits of 611 please slowly state and then spell your name for the record? You will have 2 minutes and you may begin now.
Good morning, Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee. This is John Pirro from the Clark County Public Defender's Office. I just want to echo the comments that everybody who has come before me and address a few things that Assembly members have brought up. Assemblywoman Hanson, the fines and fees are pretty outrageous and range in the thousands of dollars, especially in municipal courts, which largely go unchecked, making it very difficult for people to pay and eventually entering into a cycle where they get arrested, lose their job, lose their housing, all over a traffic ticket. And I don't think we want that for Nevadans. And then responding to Assemblyman Wheeler, this bill does not remove discretion from judges. Judges interpret law. The People's House provides for good policy. And this bill is good policy, both fiscally and sound in its criminal justice seeking equity. So I would ask and urge that this committee pass this bill. Thank you, and that concludes my testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Pirro. If we can go to our next testimony in support.
To testify in support of Bill 151, please state and spell your name now for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 710, press *6 now to unmute yourself and then slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I had the same issue. Second time is the winner. My name is Maria Nieto Orta, last name spelled Nieto, space ORTA, and I am the Nevada State Coordinator for Mi Familia Vota. Mi Familia Vota is a national civic engagement organization that unites Latino, immigrant, and allied communities to promote social and economic justice. Mi familia vota supports AB 151 and supports to end driver's license suspension for minor unpaid traffic fines, fees, and assessments. Black and brown communities are more likely to get their license suspended due to unpaid fines and fees. This causes a bigger issue in being able to survive and continue feeding their family and loved ones. We need to ensure this ongoing issue stops, and it should not have taken an unprecedented pandemic to shine an even harsher light on already presented issues. The impacted people have to choose between driving to work or not being able to drive and lose their job and financial support, meaning they can no longer pay that fee. This bill can help alleviate any inequality that is currently in our criminal legal system in Nevada. We ask the committee to support AB 151 and lead it to its passing. Thank you.
Chair, at this time, there are no more callers in support of Bill 151.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you, committee. I know that Assemblywoman Krasner was having some great difficulty with her her tech in her office. So she's actually here. So I have a visitor here. So I know she has a question, and I do want to make sure she has the opportunity to do it. So I'm going to turn that over to her to ask her question. Here, go ahead. Hi, thank you so much. And I apologize for the problems with my mic and my audio. So, you know, I was listening to the presenter and Ms. Mosley, Ms. Williams, and I am very sensitive to what you're saying about how it's not right that someone's inability to pay fees or fines should, you know, cause them other problems in their life, losing their job. And I certainly believe that we should have equal justice under law, regardless if you're rich or poor. And so with that, you know, I can understand, you know, this inability to pay fines and fees in Section 1, suspension, no longer suspending someone's driver's license if they can't pay the fines or fees for a minor traffic offense. I agree with that. And even Section 3 that provides that the DMV can't charge a fee for reinstatement of that driver's license, because again, that goes to someone's socioeconomic ability to pay or not pay, and that's not right. Equal justice under law. But Section 2, somebody's failure to appear in court, how does that have to do with failure to have the ability to pay? If you could please answer that. Thank you.
Lisa Mosley, for the record. Thank you, Assemblywoman Krasner. I will hopefully answer your question. Many of the jurisdictions don't distinguish between failure to pay and failure to appear. So if someone doesn't show up in court, they've automatically deemed as a failure to pay. And so we're just asking that whether the DMV suspends for either of those, that we just take away the ability to suspend for either of those in the failure to pay or the failure to appear. And I'm not sure how that relates to someone's ability to pay or inability to pay, I should say. So if you would maybe explain that question a little bit more.
Yes. So repeatedly, you and the other presenters have made it clear that this is about how it's not fair that if somebody can't pay a fine or fee, they should lose their driver's license. And I agree with that, you know, equal justice under law, regardless if you're rich or poor. That is our system of justice in the United States. But in Section 2, it's specifically talking about someone's failure to appear in court. And so do we want to have no penalty? I mean, don't we want as a society to encourage people to appear in court if they're supposed to? And that doesn't have anything to do with paying a fee or a fine, or if you're rich or poor, it's just not appearing in court. So I'm just not sure how that plays in. And again, I did say I agree with Sections 1 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
And
Go ahead.
A couple of things. One is that usually people don't appear in court because...
Can you state your name for the record, Ms.
Turner? Sorry. Leslie Turner. Usually people don't appear in court because, like, in relation to traffic tickets, because they're afraid of going to jail, they're afraid of getting warrants, and they know they don't have the money. Also, the system, like for instance, right now, if you go into the municipal system online, the system itself does not differentiate between failure to pay and failure to appear. So like, if I have to make a payment that's due on the 12th of the month for $50 on a payment plan, that shows in the system as like a court date, but it's actually just a payment that's due that day. So that's another point. And then also, we have to look at the people who are impacted by this. We have to look at the data, what the data shows, which is that low income communities, Black and brown people are the ones whose licenses are being suspended. They're the ones who are getting these traffic warrants. So I think it's just really important that we're talking to those people and we're trying to figure out solutions with them, with us, I guess you could say, to understand the problem. Because a lot of folks might have never had a warrant, might have never had their license suspended, so they might not understand the process and how you get stuck in that cycle. So I just wanted to add that, and then I can pass it back to you, Lisa, because I think you were going to say something.
Lisa Mosley, for the record. Thank you, Leslie. I was going to just highlight some of the things that you said. So you took the words out of my mouth, I should say.
Thank you. And thank you, Vice Chair Wynn, for allowing me to come on and ask my question on the record. No problem. Sorry about that. See, we have to be flexible. I think that is the word of the 81st session. So thank you for taking a pause. And if broadcast services, if we could go back to testimony. And just for the record, we started support testimony at 10:30 and we ended at I believe it was 10:48. So at this time, if we can move to testimony in opposition of Assembly Bill 150.
To testify in opposition of Bill 151, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Would the caller with the last 3 digits of 598 please slowly state your name and then spell your name for the record? You will have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Good morning, Vice Chair Wynn and members of the committee. Nicole Rourke, representing the City of Henderson. I'd like to thank Assemblywoman Gonzalez for meeting with us yesterday to talk through the bill and hear our concerns. We are not opposed to the concept of the bill. However, there are several offenses included under the definition of minor traffic offense that are clearly not minor, including hit and run, reckless driving, tampering with a breath interlock device, and others that should be excluded from this bill. We appreciate that these were not intended to be included. We also believe that there needs to be consistency between the proposed exclusions of the civil traffic bill and this bill regarding the definition of a minor traffic offense so that both bills can achieve their common purpose. We look forward to working with the sponsor to address these technical issues. Thank you.
Thank you. If we can go to the next caller in opposition.
At this time, there are no, stand by. Would the caller with the last 3 digits of 650 please slowly state and then spell your name for the record? You will have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Hello, I'm Zach Bucher, ZACHBUCHER, representing the City of Las Vegas. Good morning and thank you, Madam Vice Chair, for the opportunity to comment. We understand this legislation is part of a broader and very important discussion this session. The City of Las Vegas would like to align itself with the comments just made by our friends and colleagues at the City of Henderson, and we wanted to go on the record as such. We look forward to being part of this process going forward with the sponsors of this bill. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you. And BPS, do we have any other callers in opposition?
Madam Chair, at this time, we do not have any callers in opposition of Bill 151 at this time.
Okay. If we could move to callers in neutral of Assembly Bill 151, that would be wonderful.
If you would like to testify in the neutral position on Bill AB 151, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Would the caller with the last 3 digits of 101 please slowly state and then spell your name for the record? You will have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. Sean Sever for the record from the DMV. Hello, Vice Chair and committee members. I'd like to thank the bill sponsor for meeting with me this morning on this bill. We are neutral on it, but and understand the concerns. However, we did submit a fiscal note on the bill as written. We are willing to absorb the programming costs that the bill would create for us, which are basically IT changes we have to make to our system. However, there is a large revenue impact to the DMV with this bill. And as many of you have seen with the people standing outside our offices waiting to get in, the DMV is really suffering right now, particularly with our revenue due to the pandemic. We are making budget cuts and not filling positions. But we are willing to work with the bill sponsor to see if there are ways we can lessen the impact to the DMV. We can also look to AMVA, AAMVA, which is our federal agency that all state DMVs fall under, to see how other states are dealing with this issue. So we look forward to working with everyone on it, and I will be typing up my testimony and sending it to the committee manager to help them out. So thank you.
Thank you so much. DPS, do we have any other callers in neutral?
Chair, we do not have any other callers in the neutral position on Bill 151.
Thank you. And at this time, I will go ahead and bring back our sponsor for any closing remarks, or if you'd prefer, you can waive those.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez, Assembly District 16 for the record. Thank you so much. I personally don't have any closing remarks, but I know my presenters have brief comments. So I'm going to hand it over to them and then we can wrap up. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And if we can keep it brief, I know that we have floor at 11:30, so I want to give our members enough time to get down there timely. Oh, and welcoming back our chair. So I will turn the meeting back over to him. So go ahead with your closing.
Lisa, I wasn't sure if who you wanted to go first with our closing remarks.
Lisa Mosley for the record. Sorry, Chair Wynn, I was taking your job. Go ahead, Yvette.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair Wynn. I just wanted to also reiterate really quickly before I give my brief closing statement, is that there were some questions about the suspension and whether or not the person was able to drive or was reinstated if they were on a payment plan. And no, they do not. So until the fines and fees are paid in full, they do not restore any driving privileges, even though they may be on time with their payment. I wanted to just say to our chair and committee that following the promises made last summer around racial justice and the promise that systems of racial injustice would be addressed this session and dealt with. I want to just say to you that communities most impacted are holding their breath right now during this session. And we hope that at the end of the session, we will finally be able to exhale. And so we really earnestly ask for your support on Assembly Bill 151. And if there's any reservations at all or anything preventing you from voting, giving your support, please reach out to our sponsors and allow them the opportunity to have those discussions with you before you make your final decision. Thank you so much again for bringing this forward, Chairman Yeager.
Leslie Turner for the record. I just want to thank the committee and also in particular thank Assemblywoman Gonzalez for working with us and bringing us on as a part of this presentation. Is really important that we're centering the voices of those impacted by this. And again, if we just look at the data, if we look at the people whose license are suspended, the people who are in warrant status, it's Black and brown people, it's people from the low income zip codes. And, you know, we have the data to show that. And so I think we have to include those people in coming up with the solution. We have to talk to those people and ask them, like, what's going to help you take care of this? So I just appreciate everyone on this call, and thanks for having us on board.
Lisa Mosley, for the record. Again, I wanted to say thank you to Chair Yeager, Vice Chair Nguyen, and to committee members for your questions, your very thoughtful questions, and your dialogue on this issue. I want to thank all of the coalition members and folks who called in support, and even those who called in opposition or in neutral. It provokes thought. And I think it makes us all think about how we look at these laws, how we think about why we actually implement these laws the way that we do. 14 other states have already stopped issuing suspensions for unpaid fines and fees. Nevada has led the way on so many other issues, including having the first majority female legislature around the country. We are moving in directions that are leading other states. And I'm hoping that Nevada will be adding their name to the list of states who no longer use this harsh and unfair practice as a form of justice. I think it's high time that we find other ways of incentivizing, so to speak, or find other ways to make it easier for people to be able to live every day, to support their families, and to be responsible and pay their fines and fees. We know that that is what people really want to do. And so I thank you again for the opportunity to present this bill. I look forward to working with the sponsor and also particularly the DMV on how we can work on providing some relief and being sensitive to the revenue loss that they may face. I don't believe it is as extensive as it has been presented. Our research doesn't support that, but I certainly do look forward to having conversations with the Department of Motor Vehicles and our sponsors so that we can get this bill passed. And to all of the committee members, I urge you to pass this bill out of committee and so that we can move forward and get this legislation passed. Thank you again.
Are there other concluding remarks? I know I stepped in late, so does anyone else have anything to say? Okay, it doesn't look like it. I want to thank the 5 of you for presenting the bills.
Hi.
Oh, go ahead. Ms. Moya, did you want to say something?
Yes, this is Yesenia Moya Garay for the record. I just wanted to say, as an impacted person who has had their driver's license suspended, I have lived in 3 of those zip codes that they mentioned earlier in the meeting. I have tried payment plans. I tried community service. I tried to see a judge. I tried to make the payments, and I ended up in warrant status 3 or 4 times the last 3 or 4 years. The tickets have compounded. I paid them off, and go figure, 1 week later, I got another ticket, and my plates were taken. Without any more being said, I really hope that this gets passed out of committee and that you are willing to work with the community as this is a serious issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moya. Appreciate that. So now I want to thank the 5 of you for presenting and thank the Vice Chair for running the meeting in my absence. They didn't treat me too terribly bad over in government affairs, so I appreciate it, and I'll definitely go back and watch some of the testimony and the questions. So well done, Assemblywoman Gonzalez, for your first bill hearing here in Assembly Judiciary. And at this time, I'm going to close the hearing on Assembly Bill 151. I hope all of you have a great day. So we're going to go to our next agenda item, which is public comment. By way of reminder, we'll have up to 30 minutes of public comment. Callers on the line will have up to 2 minutes to provide public comment. BPS, could we go to the public comment line and see if there's anybody there who would like to give public comment this morning?
To give public comment this morning, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Would the caller with the last three digits of 556 please slowly state and then spell your name for the record? You will have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Anne Marie Grant, ANNEMARIE-GRANT. Sister Thomas Purdy, who was killed by Reno Police and Washoe County Sheriff's Office. Today I would like to tell you about Justin Morgan Thompson, who was 35 years old when he was asphyxiated to death by Washoe County Sheriff's deputies Kenneth Cameron, Randy Hill, Joe Hospodar, Peter Mickle, Brad Mustafa, Kim Peak, Nicholas Tone, Trevor Solano, and Paul Hubble, who asphyxiated my brother less than a year earlier. Justin had only marijuana in his system when he was asphyxiated. I'd like to give you some of the communications between Justin and the deputies. Why are you doing this? Deputy, you're the a-hole. This is all on you. You asked for this. Believe me, by your actions, you asked for this. This is where we are, and we are not going to de-escalate. Maybe you should rethink your decisions. Deputies then had a brief discussion about excited delirium. The same male nurse from NAVCare came in and asked ridiculous questions, such as, do you wear contacts? Do you have allergies? At a rapid-fire pace to a man who clearly was in need of medical attention. Then six deputies plus were on top of Justin. The sergeant yells at Justin, answer the nurse's questions that they're talking to. Justin begs for water. The female deputy, don't effing touch my hands. Justin tells him he can't breathe. Nurse asks if Justin feels threatened with six deputies on top of him. He replies, what do you think? Female deputy swears at Justin again. Justin tells him again he can't breathe. Nurse clears Justin to be put in a cell. Justin asks, can they please let up a bit off his back? No. Justin yells for help. Deputy, nobody is going to help you. We are the help. And as I stated before, we are not going to step down until you're in a cell. Why? We don't trust you. Justin is threatened with a taser. Deputies are repeatedly led by him on his stomach. A deputy with the taser kicks Justin. What's it going to take for you to stop being stupid? Do you not get it? We own you right now, and we're going to continue to own you. Figure it out. You aren't going to win. You better figure it out. My arm? Yeah. You just lost that arm, and I own that arm. This is now my arm, and every time you try to squirm, I'm going to tune it up a notch. We're going to throw you in a cell, and you can act stupid by yourself. Justin breathing is clearly labored, and he struggled for almost an hour. Six deputies then put him in the cell face down, and he is smothered to death. I noticed during a video there was one African-American deputy who the whole time never went hands-on with Justin. And every deputy that went hands-on with Justin then did not want to give him CPR. Only the African-American deputy who never went hands-on immediately attempted CPR on Justin. Please do not support bills that promote bad police. Please support bills that promote transparency and accountability. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment, Ms. Grant. BPS, is there anybody else on the line for public comment?
Chair, the public line is open and working, and there are no more callers on public comment.
Great, thank you so much, BPS. And, I just want to take a moment before I close public comment to thank our broadcast staff who really makes these meetings happen. Without them, we would not be able to do this. They're sort of behind the scenes, the voice of God. They make these meetings happen. And I just want to say thank you to BPS, and also thank you to our committee staff who is working very hard behind the scenes. We don't see them because we're not in the committee room with them, but rest assured they are doing what they can to make these meetings run smoothly, and we appreciate it. So I will close public comment. Anything else from committee members this morning before we talk about tomorrow and next week? Okay, I don't see anything. Again, I want to thank the vice chair for running most of the meeting today, and thank the members for your attention and your questions. Here's where we're going to go from here. Tomorrow, we do have a meeting at 8 o'clock. We have a bill and a work session, so we're going to start with the bill at 8 o'clock, and that'll be presented by Vice Chair Wynn. You probably have seen the agenda. We do have a number of work session bills. We will make sure to get that work session document out to all of you sometime today. So please take a look at that. And if you have concerns, if you could, you're not required to, but it would be helpful if you could express those to me prior to the work session tomorrow morning. And then for next week, what I can tell you right now is we're not going to have a meeting on Monday. So that will give you a chance to rest up. For folks from Southern Nevada, I would say you could maybe fly in Monday, but there really aren't flights available. So you'll probably just be here Sunday night and have a little bit of time Monday to catch up on work. I expect we'll have meetings the rest of the week next week, and they're most likely will start at 8 o'clock, but we're figuring that out as we go along. So that's what I got for you now. And I will see all of you tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. This meeting is adjourned.
Bye. Thank you, Chair.
Bye.
This is